So hello, my name is Lowell, pronouns he, him, and I am the community manager for Open Hearth Gaming. And today we're doing our talk about game facilitation, which is essentially the first part of what we do for our game facilitator camp. Uh, what this is going to look like today is the first part is going to be kind of a structural thing, very much how we use the tools that we have for building our calendar, what our processes are using that Playabl. It's kind of mechanical and pretty much to the system that we've got set up. But in there, I'm also going to talk a little more generally about running and how we manage things and about handling sessions. Once we're done with that, I'm going to talk a little bit then about how we set up games, how we plan games, how we manage them once they're posted, the kind of the session prep, and then we will move to a little more open Q&A, topics that people want covered, questions that they have, talking about running more generally. So that is the plan for today. Um, to start, though, I do want to ask if people are willing to maybe introduce themselves and give us a minute or two of what they want to say about uh, running or about the managing games or what they're interested in or so on. Is that, let me see, I hope that Michelle, is that okay? Can I start with you maybe on that?
Sure. Um, Hi everyone. My name is Michele, uh, from See Him, and yeah, uh, I recently joined the officially, let's say the Open Hearth since September, and um, I don't have much experience in GMing or facilitated games. That's why I'm very interested in this seminar. And I would love to facilitate and to GM some game in the future for the Open Heart. But so far, I love the community, and I enjoyed every game that I've tried,
Oh, good.
and enjoyed playing with a lot of people.
Excellent. Excellent.
That's about it.
Thank you for that. Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim. My pronouns are she or they. I honestly don't remember how long I've been with Open Hearth. It's been not that long, but sometime this year. And I've been playing some games there. I don't have a lot of experience GMing anything, but I'm curious. I'm especially curious about the process of GMing GM-less games, but that's its whole thing. What else did you want to know, if anything?
That's pretty much it. I just wanted to get a sense of where you're at and your interest in being here. Okay, that helps. And Cinna?
Yeah, hi. I'm Sina. Use they, them pronouns. Uh, I've only been playing RPGs for about 5 years, but I would say I've gotten a fair bit of experience on both sides of the screen in that time. I've been playing with the Open Hearth for a little while, and looking forward to probably run a game.
Awesome, awesome. So I'm about to walk through the mechanical side of things for how we use Playabl, what the steps are for using it. Uh, Playabl is an app that we've used for a couple of years now. We had a previous app. This is the one that is kind of built by one of our users internally, though they have another job. So there is a sort of slow us making changes or building on it. But it is the one that we use here. And I'm going to be doing screen shares so you can see the process for that. Uh, one of the things is that for Open Hearth, anyone can join. We have, of course, the Patreon that gives people a little bit 48-hour access ahead, but generally anyone can join, and people can run after they have played with us in one of our con sessions or one of our regular sessions at least a couple of times. That's kind of a restriction we make for a few reasons. One of them is so that people can come and get a sense of what our play community style is like, see if it fits with what they're interested in, see if the play style is something they enjoy or don't. It's That's really important to us that we get that sense of things ahead of time. It's also a way to make sure that those processes that we use, those safety tools and things, are being used by GMs. Um, and there's a sort of other thing in that if you've run with us, played with us a couple of times, then that's easier than when you go to run something. You have some people who have already played with you, who know you, who are maybe interested, and it makes that process easier. It's a small sort of on-ramp barrier that we have. I don't think it's particularly strenuous, and it's been very useful for us because I do think it is important when you're going in to play with the community, both you and they figure out what's going on ahead of time. So we use Playabl, and I'm going to screen share now and walk through the process of how one sets up a game on Playabl. So let me here get that screen share thing up. Move that up here. Okay. So this is the Playabl setup here. When we want to do a new game, we've registered in, we're in our community. We go to create new here. It's a drop down under games. So we hit create new, and this will create a game for us. We put in here the game title. One of the things I recommend with the game title, even if you have kind of a descriptive title, somewhere you include the system name in the title. It makes it easier. A lot of people will be browsing through the listings looking for particular systems. It makes it easier for that to do. I tend to put the name of the system and then colon and then a descriptor, but you can handle that however you want to. We have a drop-down list next of game systems, and it doesn't have everything on it. You can go to GitHub and edit that list, but that is outside of my skill capabilities. So I don't do that. I tend to just write in what system I'm going to be using. The next thing that you need, and you'll notice that each of these have a red asterisk by them, these early ones, that means those are mandatory, of course. Next is the player count. The player count is the number of players that you want in the game. It does not include the GM. So if I want 4 people at the table plus myself, then I'm going to put a player count of 4 there. So that's easy. Next thing is the description. I will grab copy. What I tend to do is I have a document that I write the description in, and then I take that and modify that for each. So I've got, several different models and templates and things like that. Generally, for that description, the first paragraph is going to say, this is what the game is about. This is how we're going to be playing it. This is the key things you need to know. The second paragraph, I might add a little bit about the game system. And then I also have a generic statement that I make that, we're going to record sessions, but we're going to confirm with that, talk about the structure and those kinds of things. Tell people if your availability changes, make sure to drop. That's tight 3-4 paragraphs. I do that because While I've seen some people write amazing, long, descriptive things in there, that's great, but most people want to know what the game is and they want to know the hook up front, and that's what they'll make the decision. So writing a lot in there it, is fun, and if you enjoy it, you should do it. But it's also recognized that for a lot of people, that's not what they're going to be looking at, not what they're going to be following. The other important thing that we have with the description is when I have a game that has a special requirement or special limitation, like let's say that I want for the first 48 hours only people who are new to the community to sign up, or let's say I want people who played in a previous arc of this to have first choice of it for the first 48 hours. I will put that in that first line and bold that just to make sure that information is up front, is the first thing that people see. If there's requirements, limitations, any of those kinds of things. This editor does have very basic things. You can, of course, do bold, you can do italics, you can do things with headlines or lists. Note that it automatically spaces between paragraphs, so you don't have to put an extra space in for the paragraph. So that's the basics on that. So those are really the key four things to have. The next thing is your virtual tabletop location. This means, are you using Zoom? Are you using StreamYard? What is the tool that you are using to manage the game in? For me, that's most often Zoom, like this Zoom call, and then Google Sheets. But I know that there are several other different tools that people are using. Some people are using a Discord for voice. Some people are using Roll20 if they're doing a more character sheet heavy game. It's important to put that in for a couple of reasons, but most importantly, it's an accessibility issue. There are a lot of these tools, these virtual tabletops and things like that, that require people to adapt or learn, especially for visual impairment or other uses. So it's important to have that up front so that people know what they're getting into and so they can be prepared for that. That was something I kind of missed its importance until just a couple of months ago when someone was talking about running online conventions and accessibility. I think it's really important that we get that set for folks. The next thing is the game cover image. It will fit itself to 16 by 9, the display there for the game cover. And the maximum size is 1 meg for the files. With this, we choose a file, and generally I have a set of things that I go to as my folder here. We put that in. That will also be in your media file. You can, if you're running, a game and you want to use the same image for it, you can hit the select from your media to pull up a previously used image. After that, there are 2 checkboxes here. Check if this game is going to be recorded, and it is required that this sort of checkbox is to confirm and remind people this game will use safety tools. As we have said before, safety tools are a mandatory thing used in the Open Hearth. At this point, you could hit the save and complete later, essentially put it aside and come back to finish it off, or you can hit next. Go ahead and hit next here. Once we've got that game created, we're going to actually add sessions to it. So to add sessions, we're going to click on the Add Sessions button. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to ask us for the start and the end time of a particular session. Note that this is not done in sort of standard military time. It's done in AM and PM. That's something I hope that we fix in the future. And this time that you set is your time. The system does, for each person, show them the time in their own time zone based on Google. Just keep that in mind. And of course, time zones change. We have the November and then we have the spring time zone change. This year we had a 1 week gap between sort of the European time and the US time. A couple of years ago, we had a 1 month gap for one of the time zone changes. So just be aware of that. So put 9 a.m., say 12 p.m. You could, if it were a session that went over to another day, we would have a button that we click on that. But we get the start time, and then we've got the dates, and we go down and we just a simple click and select down there on those dates. So let's say that's all of November, and then we can click forward and we can also include December, let's say. And once we've got that, we hit continue. And you can see that now in the display, we have an item for each of those events. Now, at this point, if you wanted to, you could pre-seat a member. Let's say that you've had somebody post that they really wanted to play in a particular game, then you could arrange it so that you'd have 3 open seats and a seat that was set for a person who had requested the game. The way that you do that is we go pre-seat a member, we look up their name, and I will grab Sherry. So we find their name, we click that, and then you'll see their name is displayed up top. And then you click the sessions that you want to pre-seat them for. You could do it for all of them, or you could do it for a few of them. And that pre-seats them. And then you just hit close because has done that. You can confirm that by looking at the list of sessions, and you'll see that it says X people pre-seated for that session. The next thing that is important is the session access time. By default, you should be setting it at supporter. Clicking on that, that means it's a session that's set up so that people who are backing the Patreon have a little bit of extra time to check in and choose to sign up for those sessions. However, if you're running a game that is intended to be for new players, you're always welcome to waive that period there. I think it's important that we have those games that are accessible for people who maybe are just trying out the community. So we do that. We could go and we could save and complete later, or at this point we could create the game. So I'm going to go ahead and create the game. And this is what the sheet now looks like. It has the title up there. It has some basics on it. You see it has each of the sessions on it. It shows you who's RSVP'd and who's on wait list at that point. You could now, if you needed to, you could remove people that you pre-seated from the session. And this is the basics on that. Now, let's say that you did this and then you didn't want this session anymore. We have manage, and at this point you could go through and you could edit the description, you could edit the game details, or you could cancel the game. You could also go down to the bottom and add new sessions. So basic utility tools. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this game. Yes. Okay. But that's the basics on how to use that tool. It is something that we're still developing. There are some hiccups that it has from time to time, but it has smoothed out and it works pretty well. I'm going to stop the share here. Once that is in place, when someone signs up, you will receive an email that tells you that they have signed up for the game. You will also, if those main seats are filled and there is a wait list, people will be listed on the wait list. You can check on that. When someone signs up, either for the main thing or for the waitlist, they will receive an email to them to confirm that that has happened. If someone drops and someone moves up from the wait list to the main list, you will get an email to alert you that that has happened. It doesn't tell you if someone has, for example, dropped from the wait list, but nothing has changed in terms of where people are at. So I always encourage people to check on that. Recognize that sometimes people will sign up, especially if you've posted early, a little bit more ambitiously. It's one of the reasons we do an email about a week out to remind people that they have signed up for a game in case they've forgotten or in case their schedule has changed and they need to shift things around. So that's the basic structural thing of how we use Playabl. Uh, what most games are is usually we have, I would say by default, most people are running a series that runs in a month, 4 or 5 sessions. That's often enough time to try things out, to set up a story and so on, especially with story games to get things set. We strongly encourage people to run games within a calendar month. So don't starting like mid-March and then ending in mid-April. It's not great because it tends to then overlap with other games. So we do encourage people to not have sort of hanging over sessions if they can avoid it. Uh, People can run quarterlies as well, meaning, a 3-month game or you can run a 2-month game. The length is up to you on that. I would say one shots are great. They're a great introduction. They present a lower barrier for entry. 2 shots as well, especially if people want to try something out. If they don't want to commit, it's easier to fit within one's schedule there. So with those games that we set up, we run our sessions using Open Table. And this is one of those things that when I first joined the community and I first heard about it, I was like, oh God, no, please no. Because it's kind of a scary thing. Open Table means that once you've posted it up, people are welcome to sign up for just one session to try it out, even in a series game. And it allows people to kind of test the waters, try things out, see what they think. And it's not hugely used. Most people, when they go to sign up, will sign up for a full series or so on. But it is a thing that happens from time to time. And I think it's an important thing to let people feel like they have the freedom to go and try things out. And in doing this for many years, it has been great. It's been great to run for new people. It's been great to have characters pop in for a session and bring something new to the table in that session, and then have them kind of as an NPC in the background. I'm going to talk a little bit later about what that means in terms of onboarding those new players, but just know that that's one of the things we do. In terms of posting games, you can post a game as little as a week out or as long as 2 months out. So here we are entering into November. So people could start posting for January, posting sessions for that period. Longer than that, and you risk people completely forgetting that they've signed up for a game. Suddenly 3 months comes by and oh, I signed up for this thing. But also putting it a week out means that a lot of people have already committed their time. So I really think the sweet spot is like 2 weeks to a month out is probably the best time to do that. When you post a game to Playabl, it is automatically posted on our Discord. The descriptor is posted there. There is a channel that has all of our game events. So if you want to follow what's getting posted in the most timely manner, that is the channel to follow on our Discord. There will be a link on the Discord to have the descriptor, but it'll also have a link back to that Playabl event. It's a really useful integration there. Let me take another slug of this coffee. I'm going to apologize, by the way. You're going to hear me talking quite a bit for this first part, and then I'm going to open it up more. One of the other things that I think is important besides open table is the idea that when someone signs up for a game and when you go to run a game, you are going to teach the game. You are going to explain the rules. Doesn't mean you explain all the rules, but it means that if they haven't played Powered by the Apocalypse before, you're going to explain this is how the resolution works. I'll walk you through as we go. Forged in the Dark, you're willing to walk with them through that. Usually in your character keeper, you have some reference, a rules page or a list of the moves and things like that. We don't ask players to do homework. Um, if you're running in a setting that's detailed, that has some important knowledge, I recommend giving people a cheat sheet. But when they come in as a GM, don't expect them to know that. Help them walk through that, teach them what they need to know, make it easier for them to onboard. And that's I think been a really important and really useful thing over the years that we've played. It's a good technique for the GM to focus on kind of what's important in terms of rules and thinking about what's important for people to know in terms of the setting. Like what are the core concepts that you need to know to play a character in this world? So we want to make that really easy. As a sidebar on setting up the game and setting it up on Playabl, um, uh, we if you want to record a session, you need to mark that in the Playabl description, and I would also mention it in the event description. It's also something that we check in with in the week out email. I will mention it again, and when we get to that first session. You always want to get affirmative approval for people to record. And I will ask that in session one, and I will tell people we're going to do that. I'll make sure I get affirmative approval. Often I will also say, if you're uncomfortable with that, you're welcome to say, or you're welcome to email me. If you're uncomfortable saying in front of everybody that you don't want to be on camera. Some people have safety concerns. Some people have social anxiety. I think all of those are valid reasons. If someone says, I do not want to record this session, then you don't. Period. End of story. There's no pushback. We don't, just, it doesn't happen. But the other thing is, even if you've gotten that approval in that first session of a series, we want to make sure that when a session ends, you also get affirmative approval that people are okay with you posting that session. You want to also make that check-in. Ask them if there's something they need to edit. I have had series where someone has said something about their personal lives during kind of an off moment. We hadn't pressed the pause on the record, and so they asked if I would edit it out. They named their son in the thing. They didn't want that, so I think that that's perfectly fair. There are tools to cut that out. If someone says they don't want a session posted because maybe it was really a lot of emotional bleed during the session, that kind of thing, then you don't post it. These are all reasons to do that. We always want to make sure that we do that. A lot of people don't record their games, and I think that is perfectly fine. I am hugely vain and desperate for content, so I record my sessions and post them. But if people say no, then I don't do that. I think it's super useful. Reason that I record is twofold. One, I want more videos out there of sessions where people are using safety tools, where they're showing a cooperative play culture, where they're demonstrating how these things can be used in a good way at the table. So I think that's a really important to get out there. But the second thing is we've had a lot of people come to the community, but also come to particular games because they've been hunting for something. They want to know how Star Trek Adventures is played. They want to know how Worldwide Wrestling is played. They hunt out for those videos, and it's a great chance to show them in a very raw, play as it is, unedited way what a session is going to look like. There's a real space for things like Critical Role and Dimension 20 and all of that that are beautifully edited and wonderfully acted and so on. But I think it's also good to have the warts and all versions of the session so people can see what are we going to be doing? How do we set this up? The other thing I want to mention is I mentioned the like 2 months out thing. Uh, if, for example, I were to post a quarterly series starting in January, uh, I have a choice. I could post just the January part of that 3 months, or I could go ahead and post all 12, 13 sessions at that point. That kind of breaks it out. I think it's better to often to post all of it at once so people can build it into their schedule. After you post it in on the calendar, make sure you put it in your own calendar. Make sure you put it in your Google Calendar to remind yourself what time you've set, what days you've set, all of that. It doesn't automatically do that. So you want to get that in there. About a week out from the session, or let's say you post a game that's like 2 weeks out, maybe even if just maybe a few days out. But normally for me, a week out from the session, I will send an email out that says, at the beginning, I say, this is a confirmation email. Please reply to confirm that you're still able to make it to the session. And then in the body of that email, I will say, here is what we're doing. Just to remind you, here is a link to our character keeper. Here is a link to any other important elements. Get that set in there. And again, a reminder at the end, if your schedule has changed, please drop and give me a heads up. I send that confirmation email out. What I tend to do now is the only link that I put in that email is the link to the character keeper, and then anything else like links to resources or the roller or anything like that, I'll actually put in the keeper on that safety and links tab. Because the more links that you put in an email, the more likely that Google is to send it to spam. So recognize that can sometimes be a problem. After I send that email out, I will wait about 24 hours. If one or more persons haven't confirmed, I will individually send them a follow-up to check in with them. If I don't hear back from them after about another day, I will assume that something has come up, and this happens, and I will go to the wait list, and I will check in with the wait list. I will see the next person who's on that. I will say, are you interested in playing? And I will get them there. The way that you contact people is you, as the owner of that particular event, when you go to look at it, you will see the person's name and you will see their email. That email is not visible to anyone just browsing the event. It is something that you can get to there. I have almost never had a problem with somebody missing that window, and then coming back and going, I missed that. Most people understand that happens. It's an easy way to follow up, and it's also why I think sending it out a week ahead of time gives you enough time to try and bring people in. Sometimes, of course, you'll have a deep wait list, 4 or 5 people, and then someone drops, and you go to the wait list, and everybody else has made plans. They haven't dropped from the wait list because they've forgotten they signed up for the session. It can be frustrating, but usually you'll be able to fill sessions. So I'm going to take another slug here. So we've got our sessions, we've got things posted, we've got our game on the calendar. We're going into the session. We go into that session 0, and typically what we'll do is you'll start the session. My tendency is to start just a couple minutes before the hour. I usually wait for there to be 2 people in the room to bring them in because of my general social anxiety. During that opening period, often if we're waiting for another person, I will ask people what their experience is with the system. How well do they know it, just to get a sense of what I'm going to need to teach. That's something you're going to want to check in on. I give people about 5 minutes after the hour. If they haven't shown up by then, I tend to get started, even if they're still on the list, because we don't want to waste everybody's time. If you have a situation where someone has signed up, has confirmed that they're going to be there, and has not dropped, and then doesn't show up, it's worth contacting me about that, because I'm not going to yell at this person or anything, but it's good for us to know if there's some people who maybe don't know what our best practices are for signing up. And usually, if I see a name pop up a couple of times that has done that, I'll go and check in with them and make sure everything is okay with them, for one thing, but also say, hey, when you sign up, it's okay if you don't sign up, but it's also great if you let us know. If someone does let you know, no harm, no foul. That's a safety tool for people if they can't come. If they, just before the game, they get super stressed and they don't want to. But we like them to let you know that they're not going to be there. So generally, session 0 is often our character gen. You might use pre-gens. You might do co-opt character building and things like that. I'll talk a little bit more about the process of that during the general talk, but what's always going to happen in that first session is you're going to introduce yourself. You're going to introduce your pronouns. You're welcome to then walk around and have the players introduce themselves, and what their pronouns are and what their experience is with the game, or the setting, anything like that, what their interests are. Get that set. I encourage people, and I see everybody's done that, to put their names and their pronouns in their little Zoom descriptor. It makes it easier when I go and look around to follow up on that. We use a layered set of safety tools here in Open Hearth, and I use it everywhere. I use it in home games. I use it in off Open Hearth games. I use it in Open Hearth games. The first thing is that I start with cats, and I expect that you all are at least a little bit familiar with this. But cats is, and there are various different meanings for it, but the way that I tend to approach it is concept, approach or aim, tone, and then subject matter or safety. So concept means I'm talking about what the pitch is again, what kind of game we're going to be playing, if there are particular touchstones, movies or books or TV shows, I'm going to mention those there. There's an important sidebar that I want to mention about touchstones is don't assume that people have read or watched the same things that you have. I am a dinosaur, and so often what I think everyone should know is not what anyone knows these days. So be aware of that. The people's experience may be different from yours, so touchstones help, but we don't want to rely on them. We do want to kind of express what the game is about. A lot more games have cats in the beginning of it, a nice template that you can work from. When I wrote Hearts of Wulin, there's a cats template for running it in there. that's the concept. The next thing is approach. And this is what I'll typically say. This is me describing what the session is going to be like. We've got a 3-hour session. In the first part, we're going to be creating characters. We're going to be building. That's going to take about this long. Once we get characters built, we'll do introductions, and then we're going to do bonds and entanglements. Then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to continue on. We're going to see how much time we have. You describe what the setup is going to be, describe what you're going to be doing. You preview for them. You make the players aware that there are going to be breaks, that you are aware of the time. You kind of set things up for them at that point. I move from that to tone. Tone means I'm going to talk about, is this grimdark? Is this lighter? What kind of tone have I, as a GM, my expectations for? But also, like, depending on the game, is this something that we want to discuss? How dark do people want it? How light do you want it? The recent Die role-playing game from Kieran Gillen builds a lot of that into there. There's a lot of discussion about what elements you want or don't want tone-wise in the game. Some games will use what's called a palette that Microscope uses, or a variation on that maybe at this point we talk about things we definitely want to see or things we don't want to see in the game. And then the last part is subject matter. If there are things that are worth establishing as problematic content, as content that can be triggering, we want to make sure that's in our event description when we posted the event, but we also want to make sure that we're restating it now here. We're establishing, this is a horror game that may include gore, or there may be particular topics or things that people might be sensitive about. We want to establish that for people at that point, and getting that across. And then we move to safety. We ask that people use a layered set of safety tools, meaning more than a couple. A baseline tool and a reactive tool is generally what we ask for. What I'm going to talk about is the default set of safety tools, the ones that I'm most comfortable with. And this is not to say that everybody has to use these. I know some people prefer to use certain, go forward, go back tools, things like that. But by default, what I use is lines and veils. And what I'm going to do now is, this is my spiel. And I'm actually going to pull myself up. So I have it as a reference here, one of my keepers, so that I can reference for myself this. Let's see, pull this up. So here's how I do it. I go, so the first layer, safety tool that we're going to be using after cats kind of establishes a baseline. The next is you're using lines and veils. Sometimes we use lines, veils, and ask first. A line means any material that is a hard line. This is topics, material that we don't want to see in play, that we want to avoid. Mark this if it's something you don't want. And I, as a GM, can also mark certain things as material that I don't want to see in play. So hard lines establish really clear boundaries. The next are veils. If something is marked as a veil, it means that you're okay with it in the game, but you would prefer us not to dwell on it. You would prefer us to fade to black when that happens, or if it does occur, it only happens obliquely. It only gets referenced at a distance. And then we also have ask first. Ask first means you're okay with it, but you would definitely like a check-in on this before players bring it up, before the GM brings it up. Generally, on that lines, veils, and ask first, it's in a safety tab or a lines and veils tab in the character keeper. I will have a default list, and that list is open. You may add things that are absent from it. You may add things later on. It is a living document that we can change. If a particular thing is sort of component or key to what the game is about. Like, let's say you're running Monster Hearts. You might, establish in that Lines and Veils that teen trauma, those kinds of interpersonal drama, family drama, is kind of key to that. And if it is on the Lines and Veils tab, you're going to want to mark out to people that they're aware that is an element here that while we mark it with a veil, we're going to need to talk about that element in play. So the Lines and Veils, as first, great tool, common tool. There are variations on it. Hashtag iHunt, for example, uses a slightly different version of it. There's red light, green light, amber. I know that the new Tomb Raider game uses that. There are a lot of variations on it, but it establishes a baseline. The second tool is the X card. X card is a reactive tool. People can do this gesture. They never do, but they're welcome to do that gesture. But it's easier for people to say X card and then go forward. If people put X card in the chat, sometimes it will get lost. As a GM, you're often looking at the video, and so you may miss what's written in chat. There are tools for X card built into certain platforms. For example, the Roll With Me has an X card mark put into that. But I really encourage people to say X card. We use X card to mark out content that is objectionable, that is problematic, that hits on phobias that players have, or that is wildly out of tone. When you X card something, the question that we ask is maybe like, how far back do we need to go to do that? Players never have to justify their safety tool use. They are welcome to explain why they have X carded something, but they are not required to. And there shouldn't be any pushback from you or from another player. Clarifications can be asked about timing and so on, but we never want to ask why or any kind of explanation. When someone uses a safety tool, they have used that safety tool. I also use the X card for pauses and for recalibration. I tell people that you can also use the X card if maybe the play is getting heated, or maybe somebody's stepping in aggressively into your scene. You can use the X card to stop, pause, and reset. I would say one of the more common uses of X card is maybe we're playing and we've started to lean towards something that's a line or a veil or an ask first. The X card is a good point to go, hey, I think we're heading towards this. For example, we were playing a cyberpunk game, and one of the things that had been marked as a line was slavery. And at some point, we were going into issues about androids and artificial life and things like that. And one of the players kind of stopped us and said, I think where we're heading here tone-wise is a question of slavery. And we've kind of marked that as out of bounds for the discussion. And we stopped and we had a discussion and we recalibrated and we went forward from there. It's a great thing to do. The X card can be reactive and it can be multi-purpose. The other thing with the X card is that if something has happened a couple of times in game and the player has not X carded it, and then later on they decide that, oof, this is actually not working for me, they are still welcome to X card it. And I make sure to tell players that at the start. Just because you haven't X carded something the first time it happens, it does not mean that your opportunity has passed. You always have that right to do that. We also have, for games that involve romance, we will usually have a romance matrix. This is another tool where people can put their name and then say if they're interested in romance subplots with PCs, with NPCs, and or do they want people to check in before they move to those kinds of plots. This depends on the game, whether the game leans into it or not. I highly recommend having that in there, just so people are aware that those plots are possible. The last of our safety tools is open door. Open door means that if you're not feeling well, if you have to step away, if you have to go to answer the door, anything like that, you should do it. It'd be great if you could tell us that you're going to be back or whatnot, but you're not required to. If you need to leave, if you need to step away for whatever reason, you should do that. Don't feel that the social contract obliges you to suffer through for whatever reason. And the other part, sort of on the other side, is we as our fellow players and GMs recognize that that could happen. Open door also means this. If after session 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, you realize that this is not the game for you, that for whatever reason, it's not the game you're expecting, or it's not a game you're enjoying, or whatever, you can write to the GM and say, gee, I'm not going to be back for the rest of the series. No harm, no foul. The GM won't press you for reasons, won't ask why. They will thank you, and they will move to the wait list. You should never stay in a game that you're not enjoying. I have been playing long enough that I have been stuck in those games. And you should never be trapped in something just based on that social contract. So we want to express all of those safety tools to the players. Generally, I will do that talk, and I've got it down to a tight 15 minutes in session 1. And I'll remind people about what they are in session 2. And then going forward from that, I'm assuming that people have an awareness of that. Sometimes I'll check to make sure that if anything has been added to the lines and veils, but I don't need to go over it each time unless we have a new player joining. If we have a new player joining, then I will briefly go over those safety tools again to make sure that they are aware of what we have in play. Generally, I run about 3 hours. 3 hours works for me because it's about how long I can handle having these headphones on my head. I have glasses, a press in. I've never found really comfortable ones. And it's about how long I can manage. I do run 4-hour one-shots for the cons from time to time, because often with one-shots I need that space. But generally, I'm going for 3 hours. I think that's a good time. I usually take 2 breaks during play. If we're in a regular session, I will take a break on the hour for 10 minutes. And then on the second hour, I'll take another 5-minute break. I keep that in mind. One of the things I do that I recommend for folks is I have redone my screen here. And up here in the upper right-hand corner, I've moved the clock. That means at a glance, I always know what time it is. That helps for scene management. It helps for keeping an eye on the break times. It helps you keep aware of that, so I don't have to have my phone down, or I don't have to look at the bottom of the screen. It's a little less obvious, and it's a little easier for me to know what's going on. I think it's really important that you demonstrate that people's time is valuable, and that you're aware of what time it is, and that you're going to give them the breaks. You're going to handle that. Sometimes we'll go a little bit past if a scene is going particularly well, or during that first session, if we're doing character creation, we don't want to break it up. We will do that. At the end of a session, and this is optional for you, but I highly recommend it, you give, I would say, about 10 minutes for some feedback at the end. I usually use stars and wishes. Stars being anything that people liked in terms of the game, the play, but particularly other characters' actions, other players' work. And then wishes are generally things that people would like to see for their character, things that people would like to see more of, things that people would like to see less of. Uh, it's a check-in. I write down those stars and wishes, and that's one of the things I use for prep for the following sessions is I go and check what wishes were made at the end of that previous session. It's a useful tool. We used to use another tool that was much more kind of hard-edged and workshoppy, but it was workshoppy. And one of the things is that to properly workshop, you need some training in how workshopping works, how giving feedback and giving critique works. So we're not doing that in that debrief at the end of the session. We're asking for things and we're complimenting people's work. Uh, Once you've done that debrief, whatever kind of debrief you want to do, then if you've been recording, you'll check in before the end and say, is everybody okay with me posting the video? And if they are, confirm on that and you end that session. After the session, um, uh, you can, if you're posting on YouTube, we do have some thumbnail things that you can add in for the backgrounds and things like that. If you've noticed that a player has been struggling, if maybe they've been particularly quiet, if maybe it seems to you like there's been some tension between them and another player, uh, you're welcome to check in with them. That it's a time to do that. If you feel comfortable with that, if you feel comfortable checking in with them, if you're willing to do that, you can check in after the session. I would make sure I check in within the first 24 hours after the session. I had a game where I had a player at a certain point clearly shut down, and they were off camera. So I wasn't getting some of the feedback that I might normally get in terms of why they were reacting in a particular way. And I wrote to them to see, was it a particular rules decision or was something happening in their environment, or is there something they wanted? And it was that I had made a particular rules call that had kind of bugged them. And so we had a conversation about that. If you're willing to do that as a GM, you're welcome to do that. But again, I recommend that you do that within that first 24 hours. It's also a good time to check and see who signed up for your next session. If there are new players coming in, this is the point at which you want to reach out to those new players coming in to help onboard them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. We're going to take, let's say, about an 8-minute break here. I'm going to stop the recording. This will give me a chance to dry my parched throat. We're going to talk a little bit about session prep and keepers and things like that. And then I'm going to move to more general session management and ask like that maybe a little more if there are questions, things, topics that people want to go over. So let's take till 10 after, so about 7 minutes, and then we'll continue on. So that's all very much the mechanical, how we post things, when we go to set up a session, what the structure is, all of those kinds of things. I want to talk now about kind of more the table management and prep and those kinds of issues, what you do at the table and the process of getting a game to the table. Uh, I I often default to the games that I know and enjoy. I run Hearts of Berlin, I run PBTA games a lot, but I also run a lot of new games and a lot of games that I haven't tried out before. Uh, One of the things that I do when I go to approach a game that I haven't run, haven't played much of, is I will check and see if someone has already hopefully built a character keeper for it. And we have in the Open Hearth folders, we have hundreds of character keepers for different games. We also have different versions of character keepers for different games. For example, some people will build character keepers like for Blades in the Dark or whatnot, with each character on their own tab. Some people will build it with all the characters in parallel on one tab. That's kind of a design philosophy for that. If there isn't a character keeper, then I will go to build one. And usually, I can find something that's a template, and then I can rebuild. All of those character keepers they're on there are there for you to build on, for you to modify, for you to make what you want, change the colors, change the font, change the setup. They're all there. Uh, I I kind of go there and build at that point. Uh, for me, the uh, what I want to know when I go into a new system, and even when I'm going into an old system, is what's kind of the minimum that the players need to know to make an informed decision about what they're doing. It's why with Powered by the Apocalypse games, I'll make sure that there's a tab with the basic moves with the reference for what stats go with what things on there. If it's a more generic game with a default resolution system like 2D20 or the Free League games or things like that, I make sure that I have a page that explains what that resolution system looks like. We want to figure out what is the minimum that people need to know to make those choices so that we have a handle on that. I will often go into games, especially heavier games, where I know that basic premise. I know the sort of key elements, but I haven't looked at the crafting system or any of the fancy things. You don't have to feel like you have absolute mastery of something to go into run. You will pick up and you will learn from there about what you need to learn next, what you need to know. Um, my prep for a game. I generally, with a PBTA game, if I'm coming in with a premise, I try to keep it very light. For example, with my Hearts of Ulin campaigns and one shots and things like that, it's basically that it is a wuxia game, but we're starting out with everybody going to a wedding. That's kind of my a default go-to thing. Uh, I try to keep that very simple for that first session to have maybe a general idea of what kind of situations or incidents or play I can put them into, but I don't come in locked with anything in that. Uh, in the following sessions, after that first session when we get started, I run enough that I have really tried to train myself to not do more than an hour of prep before the session. I'll be thinking about the game throughout the week. I'll be thinking about issues, ideas, things like that. But in terms of writing things down on a piece of paper or typing up notes or that kind of thing, I try not to start until that hour beforehand. That keeps me honest. It means I'm not fretting and thinking about it all the time. It makes me focus in on what do I need to get to the table. My prep usually involves looking at what the wishes were from last session, what big plots I remember happening, and I write those down. Uh, who are the key NPCs who have been present, or key NPCs that are in characters' backgrounds that have not shown up, and think about how I might bring those onto the table. And if characters have bonds or entanglements or goals, I write those down. And again, I keep my plot, prep, that kind of thing very tight. If we've named NPCs in the previous session and I don't have a picture for them yet, this is a good time to go down the rabbit hole of Pinterest and find a good picture for them. I have a tab that I keep with all the NPC pictures in all of my keepers so that players can add pictures in if they want to decide what somebody looks like, or I can add in ones in between. For me, NPCs, their desires, their wants are really fun. I will often throw a lot of NPCs at the wall, and we'll see which ones players remember from session to session, and then those are the ones that I will focus on. If we're still very much kind of up in the air in a game, like maybe we haven't found what the mainline hook is, I will write down each player's or each character's name, and I'll write down three things that might happen to them, three interesting things that might occur, three people that they might meet. Just make a short list so I have that in the back of my mind. With story games, a lot of those are very player generated, player pushing forward and things. But sometimes there'll be those moments at the table when the players are looking at you. They want to go and do something. They're not sure which way to go. And so I like to have, just an incident, just a person, just an interaction. Um, when I'm thinking about the game and the play of it, if we're in a standard 3-hour game, we've got 3 blocks of time. We've got the first hour, we've got that second hour, we've got that third hour. I want to make sure in my mind that in each of those blocks, each player has at least one interesting choice, move, or interaction. I want them to make a decision, make a roll, invoke a move in each of those blocks. I try to keep that in mind throughout. Uh, First part of the session is about following up on the last session, the plots that have occurred there, kind of drawing those things in. Second part can start to change that up if we found something we want to focus in on, a place that we want to go. That second part drives us to that. And then when we get into that third part, I know that I want to get a significant interaction so that we can hit on a high point. That's how I visualize the sessions when we go through. If you are stuck, I tend to keep a list of inciting incidents, especially for early sessions. The classic one for me when I'm running a new series, a 2-shot or even a 3 or 4-shot, that maybe something I haven't played before that we want to start really in the middle of things is I will turn to the first player and I will say, "Why is this room on fire?" And I will get them to tell me that. I'll describe a little bit about the room and I'll ask them why that room is on fire. And then I will go around and ask the other players to add to building up that scene. Or why is this ship sinking? Or why is this building collapsing? Or how is it that the villains are winning? Something that puts them in the middle of the action, allows them to draw things together. And then we kind of kick forward from there and get that scene tightly done in 1 or 2 blocks. And then we can kind of open things up. It's kind of a prologue, immediate scene there. The other structure that I have is, and this is especially good if you have a game where the characters have built up some strong bonds, like Monster Hearts or Masks or Hearts of Wulin, is there is a place that the characters are going to, a party, a location, an incident, whatever. They're going somewhere. And I split the group into 2 pairs, trying to think about what's the most interesting set of arrangements of their relationships. If they have tension with another player, I'll put that other player, the other group, the other character, the other group. And then they're on the road. Something happens. It brings them together. There's usually a conflict, a fight, something where we can engage with the mechanics and the rules to show off how that works. They're together. They have some social interactions, and then they move on to the place they're going to. It sounds very generic, but it works. We want to be thinking about how the players get a chance to express their characters, how they get a chance to make choices, and also how can we early on demonstrate the mechanics in an easy way. These are things that we want to be thinking about. Uh, I mentioned before about, I'm kind of moved to a little bit of a sidebar here about bringing new players in. Uh, if you have a game where the player arrangement has changed out, maybe mid series someone has dropped and a new person has come in, or even a person has come in for just one session. One of the things you want to do is you want to check in with that player ahead of time. You want to give them a briefing on what's happened very lightly. You do not want to flood them with all of the story and things like that. You want to tell them what they need to know. You want to introduce them to your character keeper so they can see. Ideally, you want to help them make their character up before the session so that you're not eating up time with that. That means probably some back and forth with them about what they need to know in terms of creating characters, but helping them do that. When they come into the session, we make sure that we have them introduce their character and get them in early. Get them into a scene or a moment or an interaction early so that they are not sitting around because they're not going to be certain about what they need to be doing. Some players will. I mean, some players are dynamite and are right on it, but you want to help them find their place, get into that. A lot of fellow players, they're there to help. They want to make sure that somebody gets in there. They're going to be good about that. If a player is just coming in for a single session, you want to think about like a really interesting, dramatic thing that can happen to them before the end, so that they have a big thing and a moment that they can play out and have some satisfaction with. If their character is only going to be there for one session, you might even give them an epilogue for their character at the end of that session. But we want to make sure that we bring them in, we don't overwhelm them, and we do that as gently as possible. Recording sessions often helps with this, so people can watch the previous session. But sometimes you haven't recorded, or sometimes you won't have a chance to do that. Let me move on to some things about session management. I've got a big list on the agenda thing they wrote out, as you may have noticed. I want to hit some of the key ones that I think are really important, the ones that for me are big. And then I want to open this up to more discussion, questions, topics that people have concerns about, interest in, all of that kind of thing. Generally, here we're talking about running online. But of course, this also can apply to face-to-face. But I will tell you the trick that I learned that Rich Rogers taught me early on that I think is one of the most important things about running online. When you address a question to the group, when you present a question, and a lot of GMing is about that kind of eliciting information, asking questions, getting responses, working with those responses. When you ask a question, you always ask a question to a person. You always ask a question, name it to a particular person. If you ask open questions to the table, when you do that, you are going to get dead air. People are going to hesitate. They're going to be wondering if they should go. There's going to be some thinking. It's going to get tense. Nobody's going to want to talk. They're going to walk over. And each time you do that, you're eating up a little more of the time. It's much better to address those questions to particular people. Even if you're asking a very open question, like, what does the group want to do next? Where does the party want to go? You can ask that question, but then direct it to someone. All right, where do we think the group wants to go next? Sherry, let's start with you. And you point it to a particular person, and then you manage going around with that. It's a really easy thing to do, and I think it makes a huge difference. It, besides keeping things going, it also tells the players that you're paying attention, that you know their names, that you have a sense of what you want to do, that you are managing things. Related to that, early on in session 1, session 0, whatever, I try to model how I'm handling initiative, how I'm handling turn order, how I'm managing the table. So usually I look at the character keeper and I see the order of people in that character keeper from left to right. And when we go to the table, when I do a go around or I ask questions, in that first session, I follow that order. And I try to make that really explicit early on. I will say, this is the order we're going to kind of go in. I'm going to start with the person who's in the first chair, and we're going to go around. I will always say, if somebody has something that they want to do, that they want to jump ahead, jump in. But otherwise, we're going to kind of go in this order. It makes things easier. It also tells people that they're going to get a turn. They're going to get a chance to go. They know that. They know that there is an order. They know that things are going on, but they also know that it's flexible enough that if something were to occur, and you as a GM might do it, may go, okay, normally we go this, but it looks like maybe what Rob is doing is going to impact other people. So let's go with Rob. I set that up early. I model that early. So people are aware of it. On following sessions, I will shift who is the first player because you don't always want to put somebody in the hot seat of always being the first player. So I'll shift it during breaks. I'll shift it by one seat in a clearly grabbable manner so people know. But I definitely make that change. It's really useful. It helps keep the play flow. It's really important. There are other things that you want to model early on. When we play a lot of story games and things like that, there's a lot of collaboration that happens. And if players are used to story games, they may be comfortable with that. They may know how that works. But if you have players that are coming in from more traditional games or things like that, they may not know. So a lot of what we're doing is we're asking questions, we're getting information from them, but we're modeling like how that question and answer works and what the limits are for them. What can they establish? What kinds of things can they put down as facts? What kind of details? I'm very open with that and try to integrate what they've got there. When I ask someone, so what do you think is happening here with this person? I will pause and I will often provide a set of examples. Do you think it's X? Do you think it's Y? Or do you think it's Z? Or do you think it's something else? I try not to present those questions as binaries. I try not to say, is it black or white? I try to give 3 options, but I also try to make it clear that if it is not one of those things, what's your idea? Like, give people the room to ask that. I try to model that that's how I'm going to be asking you questions. That's the kind of information I will get, and that I am cool with you giving me new answers. Here's a cheat. If you're playing at a table and there's someone there that you've played with before, that you know that is a veteran player that knows how you run, early on you start with them because they know how you operate and they can show what kinds of responses can be elicited. It's a little bit of a cheat, but it's worth doing to get that across. Related to kind of declarations and establishing facts about the world, the other place that people are going to be maybe uncertain is information gathering. If your games have mysteries, if your games have questions, things like that, demonstrate to people how that asking questions process works. In some games, there's a set of questions built into a particular move, but in other games, it might be more open. demonstrate to people kind of what the level, what the openness of the question is. Let them ask it. And if it maybe seems a little bit open, ask them, okay, how are you getting that information? What are you doing to get that? I try to establish that early on so people know, so they know when it comes around to them, what kind of investigation can I do? What limits are? How much information am I going to get? What is it? Is it going to be a really granular, you found a blood stain, or is it going to be me describing what the crime scene as a full looks like? Try to establish that early on. Um, with that, as another cheat that I do when I do mystery games, because I love mystery games. I run them all the time. It's one of my favorite things. One of the things I establish is that when we do kind of a go around and each person is looking into something, maybe they're in different scenes in different places. I establish that if person A has found out information, when we get to person B, they've been given that information and they can ask questions and they can act and build on that. Unless you have a good reason, like the game structure is about lack of communication or lack of information, letting players pass that information freely is the way to go. It makes things much easier, much smoother. It might not necessarily fit with how the setup is, but it's worth doing. It clears some roadblocks. It depends on the game, but I think by default I operate in that way. I think for me, game flow is really important. As I said, I keep the clock up here in that upper corner. I will try to watch for how long a scene has gone on. When I break into a scene, like when I think it's a good place to stop, I break in as affirmatively as I can. I break in by going, that sounds great. Awesome. That's a really good idea. That's a really dynamite point. Uh, it seems like we can go, on. Does that feel like scene? Can we move on? I do give people the opportunity if there's something else they want to add in to do that, but I want to put a period on that, maybe even an exclamation point on that before we move on. If it seems like a scene is going on a bit, I might say to that person, okay, let's get to that move. But then I'll also say, Rob, you're up next when we're done with this move. Point to the next player, alert them that they're going to be going next, that's happening, so that they are aware, and so that the player who's currently going is aware that there is somebody else in line. Sometimes one of the best ways to do things is to have a move rolled or an action taken, give them a result, a hard move or a resolution or something like that that's going to spark further things, cut there so that they have time to think about it by the time we get back around to them. Cutting early is good. It's really important. One of the things you're going to be doing as a GM is you're going to be learning about what the play style is of these people at the table. And it's important to kind of be aware of that. Some people take a long time to answer a question. And that's one of the things you're going to learn. And as a GM, you have to get used to that. If someone takes a long pause, as a GM, your instinct is, oh my God, have they heard what I've said? Are they understanding what's going on? Like your instinct is to follow up and to ask them again. Relax, take a breath, give them a chance to respond. If it hangs a little bit longer, then you can follow up and say, so what do you think? Or rephrase a question in a different way and follow up. You'll learn very quickly who the players are who take those pauses, and you want to be comfortable and good with them. So you're learning about who your players are. One of the things to recognize is that any player that comes to your table is a product of every table that they have ever played in. If they've played with a bad GM, if they've played at a table where they've had to fight for attention, if they've been playing in a game that has this particular kind of tone, they're often bringing that to your table. So when a player reacts in a way that you find odd, maybe is a little more aggressive about getting time at the table, just remember that. Remember that that's often what's happening is that they've been trained in a particular way. They've learned that this is how you're supposed to play at the table. And so in response, a lot of what we're doing is modeling what good behavior looks like. Let me, before I kind of go into my rambling list of more things, let me open up and see if there are some questions or some things, topics that people would like me to cover or discuss. Keeping in mind, as I said in the earlier on, I am a dinosaur. I'm a person who's been running for a very long time, and learning to play online, learning to play story games radically changed my approach to GMing. And my approach to GMing changes a lot. It has evolved. It has become very different. But where I'm at now may not is definitely not the perfect place. And what I'm telling you in terms of style may not fit with how you want to run, how you want to handle things. So do keep in mind everything I'm saying is from my perspective of what I'm comfortable with. I try to run games that are in my wheelhouse, in my comfort zone, both in terms of subject matter, but also in terms of how the game plays out. So, at risk of asking an open question to the table, I will say, is there anything anybody wants to ask about, has a question about at this point? There's that silence.
Yeah, I do have a question,
Please.
and it's more like a thought exercise, let's say.
Sure.
But I wanted to come back to asking question to the table, and I was wondering how strict do you are concerning your own rule. So let's imagine the classic question, what do you do addressed to the whole table?
Mhm.
Is there something that you do? Is it something that still works? Or it depends, of course, on the players and the table. Or you try to address that question to someone in specific.
I think it is really useful to point that question at a player, particularly if, as a GM, you know that a particular player has an idea, has a strong sense of where they want to go, has a plot or an entanglement that they're interested in. With that kind of question, too, I think it's also important that you don't let that first player absolutely set what's going on. You make sure that once they've said, okay, this is where I think we ought to go, you say, okay, that's a really good idea. We move to the next player, kind of repeat what's been said and say, what do you think? What else do you think is on the table? This is at this point is meeting management. It's a business meeting at this point. You're trying to get everybody's suggestions and feedback, and then you, as the GM, are going to synthesize that. At the end, you go, okay, I've heard a couple of people mention Mount Doom. Maybe it does seem like that seems to be where we're headed. Is everybody cool with that? And work it that way. I think in most cases, it's worth starting the direction of things. But also, as with any kind of thing, maybe even saying, well, let's start with Bob. But if anybody else has something, if they want to jump in and suggest something once we're done with Bob, we'll kind of keep it open. So it may be that we get a little more free form at that point. Does that seem like a reasonable answer?
Absolutely, yes.
Uh, that is a phrase you'll often hear me say when I run. Uh, when I make a ruling, when I check in with something, I will often say, does that sound like a reasonable answer? Does that sound cool? Does that sound all right? I tend to do that to make sure that we're on the same page. Uh, One of the things that can happen as a GM when you're running, if you're going fast, if multiple people are talking, if someone like me has a heavy Midwestern Hoosier accent and you're kind of maybe not able to follow what's going on, I will make sure that I'm actually answering the question that they've asked. Because sometimes they'll ask a question, they'll want an answer. I want to make sure that I'm responding to what they've said, and give them opportunity to reframe that. Like if they're investigating something and they've asked about X, and I answer it and check in, and they might say, "Well, I actually wanted to know about this thing in particular," and then I follow up on that. I do a lot of check-ins. When I say something, when I establish something, I want to do that confirmation, repetition, that kind of thing, repeating stuff throughout, especially when you're doing a go around, kind of establishing what has already been put on the table, reminding people of what's already been in play is a really useful tactic. Other people have questions? Kim, do you have any questions?
I do. I have sort of one, I don't know, culture question and one table management question.
Please.
I've seen a couple. Are posting two-player games legit? Like I have
Yes.
a lot of For the Queen or Descended from the Queen that I'm interested in that are.
Yeah, 100%. We don't get enough of those, and there are so many really strong. I think Starcrossed and a lot of other games that handle that two-player. It would be great if we could get more of that. Uh, uh, for some GMs, it's really kind of nerve-wracking because there is that sort of strong. It's like a spotlight on just those two players. But yeah, if you're interested in running that, definitely. And I know there are tools out there. Yeah.
And then the other question, sort of table management, is do you have tips for when people get in a sort of politeness battle and like are trying to defer to each other and no one wants to be the person who says the definitive thing?
Yeah, that is the question of who wants to get the last cookie at the table and they're battling out. Uh, that is a place where I, as a GM, will definitely step in. And I step in by establishing what are the choices that are on the table. What are the things that have been established as X or Y, um, and really try to draw out like these are the things we need to choose between because they've been established, and then I'll pull the table. Uh, if I, as a GM, already have a sense that maybe the table is leaning one way, I'll be explicit and say that, okay, we've got this and that. It does seem like maybe this is the way that we're headed. Is everybody okay with that? And then I move forward. Uh, Check in, repetition, establishing what the choices are, and then moving it along. There is this thing in story gaming where, as a GM, you don't want to be heavy handed. You don't want to push the story. You don't want to drive things forward. But sometimes you do. You do have to draw out and be the person that kind of claims responsibility. So yeah, when you get that politeness battle, and I have seen it many times, you want to do that. I will say on a related note to that, um, one of the things you do want to watching for, especially with that kind of set of choices and things like that, is if some players are dominating the choices, dominating the decisions, you want to keep an eye on that. Is that happening because of their character's personality? Is that happening because of the player's personality? If that is, it does seem like it's maybe one person is grabbing that. I will make an effort later on to signpost, to focus in, to spotlight players that maybe have not gotten the chance to make those decisions, not gotten the chance to make those choices. And mind you, some players aren't comfortable with that choices, and you kind of learn that, but you want to do that. This is particularly true uh, when you're dealing with issues of gender or marginal players or things like that. There, one of the conversations I have with my wife several times, Sherry and I have talked about this, is uh, that she was socialized that when there's a conflict, when there's a set of choices, you get along, you defer to the other person. And that's often about certain kinds of socialization. You as a GM want to be aware of that. Be aware. Studies show, you all know this, that men, people who are socialized as men, often can't read how much they've talked in a meeting, and especially how much women have talked in a meeting. They perceive women who've talked very little as having talked much, and want to be aware of that thing because all those kinds of gender issues and things happen at the table. So we want to see what we can do to help out with that and give those people who might be hesitant, might not want to speak up, give them the room and the space to do that. And that's tough, but we work at that. Cinna, do you have any questions?
Yeah, back more so towards the actual putting a game together and Playabl and that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if there's a if there's a clear, how do I put this? I can't put it into words, I'm sorry.
Are you talking about like clear limits or signposts or
Uh, like if there's a player that is clearly not fitting in with the rest of the group
okay, yeah.
for any reason.
I think that is a really good question. Uh, if you have a player that you find is wildly off tone or wildly off topic, that can rarely happen, but it does. And sometimes what I will do is when they do suggest something that seems, you know, kind of out of what the rest of the group is doing, I will X card that. I will X card that and say that seems off from what we've established, what we established earlier, what we established in lines and veils, and get that set as much as I can in that part. It's a hard thing to do. Like as a GM, you don't want to do that. Like your instinct is to not do that. But if it feels like they are dragging it off and the other players are reacting to your vision negatively, X card is sort of the first step. Sometimes after a session, if I feel like that's happening, I will check in with the other players privately and get their perception. What did you think? Are you happy with where things are going? And do that privately. Uh, and if there's still an issue, I will reach out to that player and talk to them about that and see if they perceive it that way, um, and figure that out. And often that works. However, uh, sometimes as a GM, there are players that do not fit with the way that you run, that you are uncomfortable running for. And in the community, we do have the open door policy, and that open door policy as a safety tool applies to GMs. If you're running for somebody and you are very uncomfortable, they're giving you a lot of pushback, They seem to be, aggressive to other players. They're not on tone. You can contact us in community management, and this is how we handle that. We will talk to you and make sure that you want us to intervene, and you can have us either go and talk to that person, or you can have us essentially establish to them that you wish to open door from playing with them. In which case I will go and will say to that player X, this GM is having some issues. Sometimes players and GMs don't fit, they don't sync up. This happens from time to time. We would ask that you, if you're in an ongoing game, drop from that game or not sign up for future games that they are running. We ask that you not contact that GM, and they will not contact you. And this is not something that we discuss openly in the community. It is an invocation of a safety tool. And when we do that, we don't question it. We don't give pushback on it. That's kind of the nuclear option. And it does happen from time to time. But a lot of that, I think, can be handled by being a little more proactive as a GM at the table, establishing, what those bounds are, what those limits are. I can remember one particular game where I had a player who kind of went off tone early on, and I was like, okay, maybe I should say something. But then all the other players went off tone, and I was like, okay, I guess that's the tone we're playing with now. So sometimes you got to be flexible about that. But yeah, it's a tough one. But it is again a kind of a safety question, a safety issue, and you as a GM need to step in. It should be fun. It should be fun as a GM. You should be enjoying it. And so the open door applies to you as much as it does to your players. If you are stressed by the world, if you're not feeling well, you should feel free to open door from a session and bump the session. It can happen. It can also happen that you get to running a game and it is not clicking. It is not working for you. I had this earlier this year. I was running Dreams and Machines, which is a new game from Modiphius. It is wants to be Horizon Zero Dawn, the RPG. And we got to session 2, and I was like, oh boy, I hate this game. And I sat down and we had a conversation with the players, and because I could feel that the table was struggling with it. They were struggling with the system, they were struggling with the point of the game, with the background, and we had a talk, and we ended up stopping the game, and we ended up running something else. And I think that's fair. I had a couple of times this year stresses with the family members' health and things like that. And I ended a couple of campaigns early because I just didn't feel up to running. And it should be fun. You should, the GM is taking on a lot of workload. The game facilitator is taking on a lot of energy to do this, and it's volunteer. So you should always feel free to do that. You're not, again, you should also not feel like you're trapped in a game. I will say that we do have a page kind of related on the play issues and things like that. We do have a page on our website about play issues. We kind of lump play issues into 2 categories. One is, violations of safety, harassment, all of those things are kind of high level things that we will investigate. We'll talk to people, and we will potentially give people bans, suspensions, from the community. But then there are that second level of a player who talks over, who goes to interrupt people. Those kinds of a little bit lower tier problems. It's worth communicating to us that a player is doing that you're having issues, particularly if you've gone to check in with some of the other players and maybe they're feeling it as well. Because the more people that tell us, we can recognize if there are players that are maybe not clicking with our play culture. And then we can go and talk to them. We can go and ask them what's going on. We can tell them that they need to manage their behavior better. And we can talk with them about that. Not in a heavy-handed way, but we want to make sure that they're having a good time and that the rest of the table is having a good time. So we do have kind of an outline of those player issues there. I think that's really important. Another technique that I want to say that I've kind of already hit on several times is don't be afraid to summarize and restate. Often when there's a set of things happening at the table and the players are discussing options, they're looking at things, they're figuring things out. You as a GM have the bird's eye view. You see what's going on, you hear what's happening. But often because players are trying to think about what they would do next, they're maybe not listening to everybody else. So if you think that people are in different places, stop and go, okay, here's what I'm hearing. Restate that, get that out there. It's a way to make things easier. It's also like if you've come back from a break or after a session, it's worth you stating, okay, last time it seemed like we had these plot points hanging over, or these were the wishes that we had from last time. Making that really explicit and getting that out there for the players so that they know what is going on. It's kind of related to how mysteries work in games. Often as a GM, you've put information out there, you've given the players things, and you're like, why are they not getting it? Why have they not figured out my wonderful problem? Why have they not solved my delicious mystery? Why have they not followed up? It's very easy for you because you know everything. So it's worth restating, reincorporating, and being a little obvious, being a little easy. Because you might think you're being obvious, but for the players, because they're dealing with a lot of different information, a lot of different voices, they don't know everything about the background. It's worth giving them that. The only person that I'm not obvious with is my wife, because she knows all my tells already. She knows everything about how I operate, and she always spots when I'm hinting at something or trying to hide something. She's got it down already. So she gets a skip on me trying to be obvious about things. I take very few notes. I don't know how this works for all of you, but I take very few notes when I run. What I try to do is write down when people give answers that establish things about the world. I try to write down NPC names, and I try to make sure I write down all of the stars and wishes from session to session. Likewise, when I go into my prep for a game, for that 1 hour that I block for that, I try not to overwrite too much. I try to leave things open. I try to provide a room for things to happen. There's a thing that's called imaginative space that we don't block in, we don't lock in too much of the setting or things to let the players come up with new ideas, to let the players add to the world. I love NPCs. NPCs, as I said, is the engine, the heart of things. Uh, one of your best tricks is if people are going out and talking to different NPCs, uh, make sure when you've gone from PC A to the next NPC rather, uh, you you think about how to make this next NPC as different as possible in terms of approach and tone and what they want from the previous one. Contrasts really help build up things. Even if the players are asking for the same thing from different NPCs, each one should react a little bit differently. Related to that, you all know this, but I just want to make this. It is okay to do voices, rough voices or high voices or cadence or speech, but we don't try to do accents. We avoid trying to do accents because often that goes into issues of stereotypes and things like that. So I generally avoid that. I try to change up uh, things with the NPCs. I will change up particular phrases that they have, things that they think about, mannerisms, how they repeat stuff, whether they talk very low, whether they talk very fast, whether they avoid using a person's name. These are all things you can do. The other thing that you can do is we often forget when we're running online, but you have a camera. And as a GM, you should use that camera. You've got your hands. I'm talking with my hands all the time, but you can also use body language. You can lean in, you can lean back, you can take up the screen, you can diminish yourself a little bit, you can establish, like in improv, your status, whether you're kind of looking up or kind of looking down. These are all things that you have in your toolkit that you shouldn't forget about. Related to that, uh, sensory details are really important. When you're describing something, think about what it smells like. Think about what they hear. Think about the sounds, the feel, the textures, those kinds of things. Add that in, or ask the players to add that. It's a really useful thing to do. Is what's an unusual smell you get in this alley? And then work in what they establish. Uh, I will often uh, take a look at, there are all these various OSR books that have lots of lists of ideas and things like that. I will go to those, particularly if they have descriptor ideas. I will make a list of those so I remember some sensory details, remember some things like that there is the smell of burnt rubber in this place. And people get to figure out what it is. Sensory details help. The other go-to question that I often ask when we're still establishing characters, when players are still establishing who they are, is, and this is even if they've given you a picture in the character keeper, which people love having their pictures in there. It's really good. Even if they've done that, I ask players, how are you dressed? What are you wearing? Like, because that's a really important chance for them to visualize, to envision their character, and to use that to say something about who they are. So let me do another go around of questions, things you would like me to follow up on, or other things that you want to ask. Again, opening the table, dangerous. Kim?
I've seen a couple people do lotteries for games mechanically. Is that just seat a bunch of players and then determine who's playing randomly off screen?
Yeah, so a couple of people have tried this. It's kind of an experiment that I know Donna and Shane have been doing. And so the way, as I understand it, they manage it is they have everybody sign up, and I believe they have it as a larger base list of players. They take that and then randomly they reorder that list. And then they contact the people who are at the top and see if they're still interested. and get them to they post the later sessions and get them to sign up for those. And they kind of keep the wait list of other people as a record there. I haven't used it. I understand that Donna and Shane have had good success with that, and I know some other communities use that lottery system as well. It's a little more overhead, especially kind of keeping track. Like if somebody can't make it, how, you've then got to figure out what your wait list is and bring those people up, and you've got to keep track of that. But it is a way to democratize some of the things, because signups can be impacted by what time of day they've been posted and those kinds of things. You should do it if you're comfortable with it. If you feel you want to do it, we don't require it. But I'm going to be curious to see if we see more of that over this coming year, if that's a thing, and if there's a way that we can eventually build tools in to facilitate that. But right now we don't have anything automatic for that. Cinna, other questions? It is fair to say no.
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. And actually, it kind of goes to a point thing. Again, with learning player styles, you always want to give the players non-binary options. You want to give them multiple options. And you also want to give them an opportunity, if you put them on the spot, that it's clear that if they're not ready to answer, if they're not prepared, if they don't want to ask a question or we don't want to, that you move on, and I will say, I'll come back to you then. Does that sound okay? And again, it's another meeting management tool that we're using there to help keep the table in order. Mikkel, I'm saying that so badly, aren't I?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
Do you have any other questions?
No.
Okay. All right. I will say, if I think there's anything else I want to hit on. One of my big regrets early on is, and I know everybody does this now, but there was a long period of time when I did not do epilogues at the end of a session or at the end of a series. Epilogues are great, and you should make sure that you budget the time for that when you get to that final session. You want to make sure that you're hitting that beat, give people time and room. One of the things I do, particularly with one shots and with even with series, when we get to that final session, is I will tell players, when we get to that last hour, I may hard frame where we're getting to, just so we can get to a conclusion. So in that last hour, I may move people, get scenes together, confirm on that, and so that people are aware that I'm keeping an eye on the time, that I am cognizant of that when we get to that place, there may be some limitations on their choices, so we can get things together. But epilogues are great. It's really important. It lets people have a chance to say where their character is going to go. I usually say you can talk about your epilogue in the short term. You can talk about it in your long term. The other thing is, with epilogues, often the order of epilogues makes a difference. So that's one of those places where if someone doesn't want to go first, I kind of make sure I check in and give the options on that. But it's a really good tool. Let me see if there's anything else that I desperately want to. We use often an online roller. You may have, if you've played with us, but you may have seen that. We use that Roll for Your Party app. It's really useful, but I don't require that players use that. They are welcome to use it. I think it's fun when everybody can see all the roles together, because there is that tension. You get to all gasp when somebody makes a great roll, or cringe when they make a bad roll. Being able to see that together is great. But I always tell people that if you want to roll physical dice at home, you are welcome to do that. Um, we don't use a shared roller because we're worried about cheating. You should never be worried about cheating. Who cares? Yeah, like if somebody wants to cheat, they're going to do it, and that's fine. That's what they want out of the game. That's great. But yeah, let people roll physical dice if they want to. I think that's really useful. Uh, as I said earlier, um, you don't have to teach the group everything. Don't feel like you have to have absolute system mastery. Don't feel like you have to deal with all the rules. Think about what's the basic thing they need to know when we start out. And then later on, if there are additional complications or wrinkles or things like that, you can bring that in. And if you're running a demo or a one shot or even a two shot, you can leave out aspects. If these are things that you think would complicate the game, you can leave that out. For example, if I were going to demonstrate Blades in the Dark, when I would go do that, if I would do that as a demo, I would leave out all of the stuff about the crew and crew selection and things like that. Those are aspects that are higher level things that they don't need to worry about. You can also feel free like to change how experience is handled or gained or things like that. For example, when I run Hearts of Wulin one or two shots, I lower the experience requirement for an advance, or sometimes uh, I will give them an advance when we hit that second break, and they take an advance. They get to make that choice and add to their character. Sometimes I give them fewer moves so that they can just focus in on the moves that they have. As a GM, one of the things I do with prep too is I said looking at the wishes, looking at their entanglements, looking at their NPCs. The other thing I do is, particularly in games where they have special abilities, in between sessions, I look and see, have they used this special ability yet? Has it not come up yet? If it hasn't, then I want to think as a GM, how do I get them a situation where they get to use this cool thing, where they get to be awesome doing that? Which brings us to a related point. During character creation, especially people who haven't played the game before or the setting before, they're coming in blind to the play. So they're making choices for their character based on kind of what they assume the game is going to be. And it may well be that when they get to play, the game is not what they were expecting. And so they've made, I don't want to say suboptimal, but choices that maybe are not as fun as other choices. So one of the things I established earlier, particularly if we've got a series, is in session 2 or session 3, I'm going to check in with you. And if you want to change up the choices that you've made for your character, for what abilities you've bought, for how you've assigned your stats, anything like that, you have the freedom to make those choices. If you tell people that early on in that session 1, when they're creating their character, it takes a huge amount of pressure off of them. It means that they can more quickly and easily, it means they don't have to stress about making that choice. And it just generally increases the fun when you do that. Whew, that's a lot of stuff I talked about there. Anything else anybody wants to ask about, discuss topic-wise, advice-wise, anything like that? That is cool. In the document, I do have links to several posts that I've made about running with different ideas. One of the things is you will have a toolbox of things that you've learned about how to run, how to manage the table, what's cool, what's fun, and things like that. And you will be constantly forgetting and remembering them. You will be constantly like, oh, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd done this, or oh, I should remember this. Don't beat yourself up about that. as a GM, you're juggling a lot of things. Just be delighted and surprised when you remember a cool thing that you can do. Um, as a GM, depending on what your personality type is, and I'm a person with anxiety and borderline depression. Sometimes I will come away from a session, I think, oh, that's the worst session ever. It's not as bad as you think. If it seemed like the players enjoyed themselves, they enjoyed themselves. Don't discount that. Uh, that kind of second guessing yourself is a way to really get yourself burnout. Um, if you're worried about it, check in with the players. Ask them what they enjoyed. Ask them what they did. Stars and wishes are not just for the other players, but for you to know that the table did well. Uh, and often players will be complimenting the other players and not you. But if they're doing that, that means that they were given the chance to have good moments, and you should consider that a win in that regard. So I think that then, if there's no other questions, I think that's all that I have to say. Does that seem cool with everybody? Um, what the offers that I make, and I want to seriously put this out there, is if you ever want to talk about running, talk about playing, if you want to talk about a game that you're thinking about doing, anything like that, you're always welcome to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to sit down and chat with you one-on-one. Particularly if you just want a sounding board. If you want somebody who's going to listen to what you have to say and not give you suggestions or feedback, I mean, I can do that. But if you don't want that, if you just want somebody to listen, I am here for that. So just message me and I will do that because I really enjoy doing that. I enjoy helping people. I enjoy helping people get into running. And regardless of whether you're running with Open Hearth, you're running in your own community, I just want more people playing. I want more people running. All right. Well, then I am going to then stop the recording, and I'm going to do that right now.